Instrument cables. I bet you barely even think about them. I bet you think about them as much as you think about that time that you walked in on your parents having a wrestling match. Yeah, about that often, like a repressed memory. So maybe today, let's invest a little more time talking about that thing between the expensive instrument and the expensive amplification that's linking the two. Maybe we should have a think on that. Hey, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. I am so excited for today's episode. I've been wanting to talk about this for months now, and let's get right into it. Why do cables matter? Why do instrument cables make a difference? The first thing that we're just going to touch upon right away is that just like everything in our modern society, we have found a way to mass produce everything, and everything is available to us now at cheaper and faster rates than ever before. And that can lead us just to grab whatever the simplest thing is or the cheapest thing is, just so we can get to making a sound or getting to what we need to do. But in the race to do so, I promise you, if you've played more than 6 months or even a year at any instrument that needs amplification, that has cables attached to it, I promise you, somewhere in your house, in your bedroom, in your rehearsal space, in your studio, there somewhere is a pile of cables that you wouldn't show off to anybody and be a little bit embarrassed that you have. It's just part of being a modern musician. But the problem with that is some of those were made with cheaper components and as hastily and fast as possible. And that can affect your sound overall, and you'll never even know it until it's too late, or you're looking back and trying to fix a problem that you weren't even aware of could be a problem. And like I said in the intro, and the way that I framed it was a little different, but we have an interview with somebody in this episode who makes a really good point that we are really fast to spend a lot of money on the instrument. We're fast to pay top dollar for whatever's amplifying it, be a guitar amplifier, a PA system, a keyboard amplifier, whatever it may be, your bass amp. But that thing that links in between, we don't care as long as the sound's in between, but that is a vital part of this system. So, what we're going to do first here, as we're just launching off, instead of me blabbing on and just telling you should probably pay more attention to it, I have made some audio examples from some mistakes I've made in studio. So the origins of this are, I was in a recording session with an artist, had them sitting down ready to record. I had everything set up when they showed up. I was as professional as could be. And the second that they sat down and I turned the mics on and was ready to start recording, a horrible hiss started coming over my speakers into the earphones of both of our earphones. And before they could even start strumming, I had to say, stop, I'm sorry, I don't know what this sound is. There's some kind of hiss in the background, and I need to address it before we record because it's going to show up on the recording. And it took me about 2 seconds to just look over and say, there's a cable attached to one of these microphones that I wasn't familiar with. I must have just grabbed it in a hurry to set things up. And the second I unplugged it and put it in a different one, it's gone. And if I hadn't paid attention, if I hadn't known that, if I'd just gone ahead with the recording, those sounds would have showed up on that recording. So in the spirit of that, these recordings that I have right now are going to show you the very subtle but important difference between a good cable and a bad cable. And I'm not talking, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I'm talking about one's just a bad cable that's been through a lot of things, and the other is a cable that is, decent, not top of the line, just good. But some money went into it versus just whatever I had lying around. So the first example we're going to play right now is the example of the good recording. And all of these recordings were done on the same interface, the same input, no levels were changed, nothing was changed. You're just going to hear the background sound that's coming from these. Now, where I record, there's a little more background noise. You're going to hear the highway. I'm next to a highway, so you're going to hear some cars. You're going to hear, I left all the doors open to the studio, so you can hear my wife listening to some Netflix maybe, if your earphone or your volume is turned up high enough. And in this first recording, you're just going to hear that. So let's just take that base recording of what we're calling the good cable here, or at least the decent cable. So let's take a listen to that. Okay, so now we have a baseline of what we need to establish as a decent sound here. Let's listen to that second recording. And again, this is that exact cable that I pulled out of that recording. I went and hung it up on the wall and let my wife know what it was. I put a little piece of tape on it knowing this is bad, that at some point I wanted to make this episode so that you knew exactly what the difference between a good and bad was, and I'd have an audio example. So here it is. Let's take a listen to what the difference is between those two. So let's take a listen to that. All right. So as you can clearly hear, there's a lot more noise in that background. I've also provided that image there that you saw of both of the waveforms. You should never judge anything by looking at a waveform, honestly, but you can see that one's much different. The bad cable had a pop in it. You could see there's a weird waveform right at the beginning. And then of course there's much more background noise to it because apparently, my guess would be, I don't know this for sure, but the shielding's not as good and it's picking up some interference somewhere in there. So after listening to those examples, you may think that's not such a big deal. I don't really understand why we're even talking about that. But the fact that you can now hear and you have an example of it, here's what you need to think about. In a recording, and if you're using that cable, it's never just once. You're using that multiple times in a single recording, no matter what you're doing. Even if it's just a singer-songwriter, you're going to use that on the whatever piano or instrument or keyboard that you're using, or a guitar, whatever you're recording. You're going to use it on that. You're going to use it on your vocals. If you do any harmonies, that's another one where you're using an open mic. So that's going to be there, up to, from 5 up to 10, 15 times, 20 times on a recording. And that sound adds up. And that sound can create a large, huge hum in the background of your recording that you're not aware of where it's coming from or why it's there, but it's because these waveforms added up over time. So for that, I have more audio examples. So I just took those exact same ones and just multiplied them by 10 and made 10 copies of them. So you could hear just a small example of what that might sound, added into a song, into a mix. And here's the example of the good 10 times right here. All right, so there's 10 of what the good cable would sound like. Here's 10 of the bad one, so you can hear the difference between where it jumps from that and how much sound is added to an overall recording if you did this 10 times. Here's that one. All right. So now you've seen and you've heard the contrast between those two cables and how that can add up over a song. And here's the scary part. In modern music, it gets even worse. Anything that's adding a sound like that or a background noise gets compressed. Everything goes through a compressor, not just once, usually multiple times, many multiples of times. You have the original compression from when you may record the track or edit the track. You have compression from when you're doing your second edits or doing any kind of bus work, and it gets put on a master bus compressor. There is so many times where that is just getting compressed and amplified that it really can make a big difference. And the other thing that you should be thinking about is that EQs added to almost everything in some way, and that could wind up, whatever you're doing, it might wind up enhancing some of the different sound frequencies of that exact hiss or background noise or whatever it may be. So hopefully now you have an understanding of how important it is to invest in good cables and how it can really ruin a recording. And this is just a microphone cable. Same thing can happen with an instrument cable. Same thing can happen with anything, a keyboard cable, any kind of run where there is cable. This can happen. So that's the important audio example, and hopefully that helps you get your head around it a little bit, but not all the way. And especially for myself, I didn't really understand. So I went out and I found us an expert that we can talk to, and his name is Mr. Hank Donovan. He owns and founded the Rattlesnake Cable Company, and he was more than kind enough to sit down with us and talk about the importance of cables and why his cables are maybe set apart from other cables or cheaper or better cables, and the importance of that. So here's an interview with him, and hopefully that will let you know what's important about that. Let's take a listen. Hi, everybody, and today I have Mr. Hank Donovan with us from Rattlesnake Cables, and he has been very kind enough to stop and have a word with us and talk about all the things we might need to know. So we'll just get right into it, if you're okay with that.
I'm down.
Fantastic. So the very first thing, and the real main reason that I wanted to get into this is what makes a good cable for an instrument, for anybody that would be using cable? What sets a good cable apart from a bad cable?
Well, I mean, I think the difference is always about durability and tone. Those are your main criteria. So if your tone is there with cable capacitance not being an issue, where it's like darkening your tone. So to avoid cable capacitance, that's one thing with darkening your tone. You don't want to have that happen. And then durability is the cable going to be able to handle being on the road, being stepped on, run over by amps, and all that stuff.
Right.
So those two have to be at a decent level. If one of those, if it's great tone, but it's like cheaply built, it's going to fall apart. If it's super burly, but it's got high capacitance, then it will affect your guitar signal.
That makes a lot of sense. Is there anything with like us like introducing sound, like outside, like buzzing or sound?
Yep.
Have you ever run into that kind of thing?
Yep. So that's internal shielding that you'll want. So again, where when I say a cheap cable, when you look at what costs money in a cable, it's the copper.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
So the more copper that you have in there, the more expensive the cable is going to be. So the higher the gauge is, the conductor is going to be in the middle, which is a durability issue, and the signal transfer issue. Because if you have like a nano hair, you're gonna bend it like this, it's gonna break, right?
Right.
So the other part is the shields around that conductor. Once you have a cheap cable, they'll start skimping on that shield. So now you're going to have like areas of not or open coverage where there'll be gaps and holes. So like our cable is braided shield inside. So it's like this mesh, which makes it that durable feel to it. But no matter how you bend it, you're never going to get a gap. And there's a different kinds. There's a braided shield, and then there's a spiral shield where all the strands are going in one direction.
Right.
And if you're twisting that spiral could open up, and then that gap is where radio frequencies potentially can leak in.
I had no
power.
idea.
Yeah.
Incredible. So, I mean, as a guitar player or whatever you're using for it, you never think of those kind of things. You're just like, I've heard a couple of those terms like the braiding and why that might make a difference. Mm-hmm. But that's the first time I think it's ever clicked.
Oh, yeah.
That is really good. Thank you so much. That is a huge insight. As an owner of your business, I've seen and I've read on your website through Rattlesnake that you guys make an emphasis that your parts are milled in the United States and it's hand assembled. Can you tell, I know there's two separate parts there. Can you tell me why you think that makes such a big difference in your end product?
Well, I mean, it's just, our cable, we work with wire mills in the United States. So that's something where I just felt was important, just to keep jobs going in the U.S.
Yeah, it's a huge thing.
So we definitely like to work with U.S. milled cable. And that's a challenge. It's always a very difficult thing. You can go overseas and get cable for a tenth of the price. Frankly,
I bet.
It's great. It's great work. We work with family-based businesses that do the milling. So it's like the one that we're really spending a lot of time and effort and money with has been really awesome to work with in California, and that's it's an important thing. Even though like plugs, it's like you could source those from different places. There's certain things that you just can't avoid. So it's like as long as the meat of the cable, which is the cable, is from milled in the United States, that gives us a good feeling. And they're all hand assembled up here in Missoula and by our team. So that's cool too.
That's honestly, it was one of the first things I heard about, and then I had somebody come through the studio they just talking about your cables, these Rattlesnake cables. Like, what are you talking about? Why? It's unusual for somebody to bring that up without being prompted. Oh. I'm like, okay, well, you're talking about it. It must mean something. I look into it. They're made here in Missoula, and I about lost my mind. And then I got my first one, and I was blown away. of like the difference between the quality of what I was using before to that was like, well, you kind of, it's like when you look back and you have that moment of, oh, I think I've made a mistake. I've been doing things wrong, and it clicks. And it was a great moment. Yeah, it was a huge moment. We got to talk a little bit beforehand before we started filming, and you were talking about you had been a musician first and foremost. How had that influenced or worked its way, or maybe even helped when it came to start building cables and doing that work?
Yeah, it's a strange parallel journey between the two. There's also an occupational change where I was a web developer and a programmer for many years, right? Those all converged into Rattlesnake just because I was a musician. I was a kind of a nerdy electronics guy, dabbled in pedals and whatnot. So I just just messed with a few items. And then as a developer, I worked in a virtual world, which absolutely, now in hindsight, I absolutely hated it because it was so virtual. It was meaningless. I was just typing stuff and I was making things, and a year they're obsolete. They're on hard drives. They just go away. I wanted to make something tangible, and that's what led to, oddly enough, cables, which wasn't like oh, that's what we're going to do next. I just happened to build a couple of cables and enjoyed it. And immediately I had band members from a variety of things were just like, what is that? And then they were saying, can you make me one? And I was like, suddenly I'm like, oh yeah, I can make you one, and then it just started to blossom like on its own.
It's the most natural thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, it was very weird.
That's when you've got something right there, is when people start, can I get one of those?
Yeah.
Huh, that's fantastic. The next thing I wanted to ask you about was, you guys offer a lifetime warranty, which is unusual these days. It's rare in modern America and what we've built now to have a company actually offer that and honor a lifetime warranty. Is that a struggle? And what went into the choice of offering that and doing that?
Well, I mean, in cable world, that is kind of a common thing. You'll see that a lot. But I think we do a good job, so we don't have a lot of those warranty issues.
Right.
And I always like working with people that even in their mind fall outside the warranty. We even had dogs eating cables, and they just
I can imagine.
Yeah, and they just tell me that their dog ate their cable and was like all bummed out. And I was like, we'll send it. We'll put two ends on it. And now you're going to have like two cables where they ate through the middle. And they'd be like, what do I owe you? And I was like, don't worry about it. And we'll send it back with dog treats.
Oh my, you're kidding me.
We do stuff like that all the time when we get them. But like I said, it's not that often. It's pretty rare, in fact. And it's just one of those things. It's just, I'd rather have a customer be loyal to the brand, and because they believe in the company and the product and the service we offer. So it's a small price to pay. It's just like, I could be stingy and say, well, your dog ate it, tough luck,
right?
Whatever. And okay, well, you're going to send us the cable. We're going to make, two cables out of the one cable. I made that person's day. They're going, if it was an accident, it wasn't their fault, and there's stuff like that where it's like, I know their word of mouth is going to tell people, and that, to get other customers knowing that we'll take care of them is a big thing. There's other companies that do weird stuff where it's like you send one in, they just send you back. It's all just very corporate, or whatever. Yeah. I definitely like to work with people and like just tell them I got them, don't worry about it.
No, the interpersonal connection. It's that next little step that you've made a customer for life there.
I mean, it hurts on our bottom line. We don't want to be doing that all the time. But it's at the end, it actually gains.
It's the long term view versus the short term view. Yeah, It makes a lot of sense, and that's one of the reasons that those kind of things are why when I first started as an engineer or as a guitarist or whatever it may be, when you start to realize that cables make more of a difference than you think. And it's time to change them out. You make that kind of, it's okay to make that kind of investment. Put a little bit more money out there because it's going to look more long-term than short-term.
That's the biggest challenge we have too. Someone will spend $3,000 on an amp and $2,000 on a guitar, and they'll buy a $5 cable, and you're like, and they'll be like, well, it's just a cable. And I'm like, well, it's just a cable, but
that's one of our proudest episodes I think we've done for the 145 Rural, is that we did a whole episode on what sound priority, what you should really be invested in. And cables wound up being number 3 out of like 10. Oh, yeah. And it really wanted to emphasize that you don't think about it, but it makes so much more difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's an accessory. So that's the same as a guitar pick and a strap. You know, but it's like,
But it's not. It's part of the sound. In your mind, you think it's an accessory, but it's part of the sound.
Yeah, you know, so it's an important piece, and people that get it definitely get it, and then there's a group of people that don't get it that eventually will.
Exactly. It's part of that learning curve.
It's part of the learning curve.
It's how you know, like, how far along are. Oh, okay, you get it. You got it.
Also, cables aren't fun and cool, and we try to make them a little fun.
I was gonna say,
cool.
yes, I've seen it. You guys have done pretty good, especially with your social media stuff that you guys have done, and the giveaways, and just the braiding and the colors you guys offer.
Yeah.
You guys found a way to make it fun.
Yeah. So that helps that too, where it goes beyond just an accessory,
right?
You know? So it's a thing that people need. Yeah.
Fantastic. What was it like watching your company start from where you were just kind of that you were talking about that natural growth where it just kind of became a thing over time? What was it like when it started to expand and grow? What was that like for you?
It was amazing, terrifying, and difficult, and fulfilling and depressing. It's all of those things. So when we go from a concept to a business where you decide this is the direction we're going. So I mean, I still needed to pay my mortgage, and I have kids and all that, and it's what you basically call, you know, a hobby business at first. You know, first it was just an idea, then it turned into a hobby, and turned into a hobby business. But then to convert it from a hobby business to that's the thing that we're doing is a very hard leap, and that's a scary leap. And that happened in about 2000, mentally 2018, 19, definitely 2020 was the year Amy, my wife, and I took our first paycheck. It was the year Max quit his job and worked with us full time.
Oh, that's a big year. Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, 3 months later, it's a pandemic.
Of course.
So that's part of the terrifying thing. But to see it when you committed to the business and say, this is the way we're going is a pretty amazing feeling, where we just let go of all the other things, and we knew we were going to take a sacrifice, and then to really focus all of our energy into it. And then when you look back at it now, you know, we're still trying to climb the hill, but you look backwards and go, wow, look where we came from, you know. It's very satisfying.
That's amazing.
But we have so far to go, though.
Isn't it that's how you know you're talking to somebody who really believes in what they're doing, because it's never about, yeah, it's amazing where you're coming. It's always what's coming next, or on that next step. Like, oh yeah, that's great, but guess what's coming up?
Yeah.
Or
I feel like we're just starting,
right?
Honestly. So I mean, I feel like we're at like step one. You know, that's the one step was 10 years, but now it's like, okay, now let's get stuff done.
And it's funny, in the corporate world, you hear it so much that it becomes almost cliche. But with your company, I absolutely believe that I guess what I'm saying is, the more you look into it, the more that you reach out and meet more musicians, you're surprised that you're not hearing more about Rattlesnake. And you're like, yep, okay, it's going to. You know it's going to catch on. That fire is going to keep getting bigger and bigger. So yeah, I think you're dead on. It's not just the cliche. I bet there is a lot more to go on. I can only imagine the things that are going through your head and
yeah.
I think that's pretty much that. I think we'll take a shift, and now we're going to talk more about your life, if you're okay with that.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right. And just before we go into talking about you and your personal life, I just want to share with these guys here, and then maybe have you answer a quick question about this one. My experience with your company is I had a couple cables that I bought. My wife bought me one for Christmas, and then I kind of knew I was all in. So I decided that I want to get some patch cables because I was building a pedal board. And so I had reached out and made an order, and there was this moment with your customer service where you reached out. You personally reached out to me, not knowing who I was, just as a customer, and I had selected that I wanted to pick it up because it was this option that, like, you can come pick it up. Like, okay. And you're like, yeah, go ahead, come on in. And so I went in to pick up these cables since we were in the same town, and you met me at the door, not somebody else. And then on top of that, as I'm already giddy because I'm meeting Hank Donovan. Oh my goodness. I mean, at this point, you're legendary in my mind. And I know, it's so stupid, but nerds are nerds, right?
All right.
And then you offer me a tour, and you showed me top to bottom the facility, the people doing the handwork, some of your new tools, everything that was going on. Absolutely blew my mind. I went home, and I must have absolutely made my wife's ears bleed with how giddy I was as a schoolgirl. Like, you won't believe what happened. instant lifelong customer. So the segue there I'm trying to get to is that customer service was not only great, but just next level. Is that something you guys try to incorporate into your business plan, or how does customer service make a difference for you guys?
Oh yeah, I mean, customer service is everything. It's about creating that community and establishing the connection to everyone, building it slowly. So you can have a great product and blast this out. It doesn't matter as long as you have that base. And if you have that base is going to support you. So they're going to spread the word for you. They're going to keep ordering from you. So it's a big thing. And both my wife and myself worked in a restaurant for years at different restaurants, and we worked together at a restaurant. And Rattlesnake's really best built on a restaurant kind of philosophy. A lot of things there that are very similar. It's when you see a crowd outside of a busy restaurant, you think that's good. That's just one check where it says, okay, that's potentially good. You walk in, you smell the food, it smells good. Okay, that's another check. My boss used to always say, you eat with your eyes first. So the presentation needs to be good. By the time you actually eat it, you're already convinced it's the best steak you ever had or whatever. And then, the customer service is great. Everything starts building up on that and maintaining consistency. That's the other real hard thing with a restaurant. You come back the next time, it's different. It kind of sucks. So all of these things I've said, like our social media is that crowd outside, like the when you sit down is when you open the box, or your buyer experience on the website. That's like you're playing this cable, you haven't even got it yet. You're already convinced it's great. All the experience factors of how you're treated during your whole process, pre-purchase, post-purchase, all of that needs to be good. And then consistency. You order again, is it similar? The whole thing, the box, the presentation, is this similar like the last time? Or when you tell a friend about it and they say, oh, I got the box and I had the thing and I got a video and blah, blah, blah. Like I did too, right? So those are all things I've learned from a restaurant, and customer service is really like where it's at. And it's an art that's like totally just getting destroyed and lost today.
Amen to that.
And
Yeah.
it's just the way it is, which is a great opportunity for us, because I feel like we can do great customer service where no one else is really doing it. Speed too. That was the other thing. It's like some people take 2-3 weeks before you get your custom thing. Ours ship out that day or the next day.
Right.
And you're like, people are just blown away. It just just always blow people away is like what we're trying to do all the time. And it means our foot's on the gas all the time, and it's exhausting. It's mentally tiring. But every day our team is like so awesome that everyone's stoked on it. Everyone's very appreciative of like what we have and like customers coming in. And like I said, everyone who works there works in the service industry. At some point, I'd rather hire someone who's a dishwasher at a restaurant than someone who's got 10 years soldering experience.
Right.
Because I just wanted to have that sense of urgency and prioritizing, and then working as a team is like the restaurant and service industry has all of those checks covered.
That is genius. Yeah. I mean, that's something you can't teach. Customer service is something it really is a person and their personality, but you can teach somebody to solder. But
yeah,
that's genius.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for offering it. And again, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for the tour I got. I still love it to this day. So that's fantastic. All right. Well, just one more time, I really want to thank Mr. Hank Donovan for taking the time out of his very, very busy schedule and sitting down with us to inform us about all the things that make a difference in a cable and why some companies take a little more effort and why that might make a difference in your sound. I hope this has been illuminating for you. I also learned quite a bit from this, so that was fantastic to have him with us. Just an invaluable resource. Again, those his links and everything down there are down below, and you can take a look at that. Also down below, we have links to his full interview. He even sat down longer and talked about his life and how all of that might have influenced his company and why he made the cables and what goes into that. So if you want to hear that full interview or watch the whole interview, both links are down below. And of course, if there's anything you need, like a resource, we have free resources down below about prepping for a recording, getting ready for that, or what you should invest your money into, what priority your sound will make the biggest difference. That's down below. All that's free. It's on our Patreon. No emails, no money, no nothing. Just download it and use it. So again, thank you guys so much. I hope this really helped out, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks and bye.